We're recycling those outdated binders by Friday. Cassandra's voice rang through the conference room that Tuesday morning, her perfectly manicured fingers dismissing decades of documentation with a casual wave. The owner's daughter had that self-assured smirk she always wore when making unilateral decisions about a company she'd inherited access to, not earned expertise in. 3 weeks later, the inspector's pen stopped mid-notation during the $110 million valuation audit. The silence in that boardroom felt thick enough to cut. Who holds the original safety certification from the 2019 facility expansion? I didn't flinch. I simply slid the pristine binder across the mahogany table, my expression neutral as morning water. Cassandra's smile disappeared like ice under July sun. That moment didn't just shift the power dynamic in the room. It validated every filing system I'd maintained, every unnecessary protocol I'd defended, every late night I'd spent organizing what others dismissed as corporate clutter. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Welcome to Payback Office Channel, where workplace justice isn't about revenge, it's about resilience, preparation, and the quiet satisfaction of being absolutely right when it matters most. If stories about professional integrity and workplace dynamics speak to you, consider joining our community. We're building something meaningful here, a space where your work experiences matter. Hit that subscribe button and help us reach 8,000 subscribers who believe that competence always finds its spotlight. My name is Adeline Thorncroft, and I'm the Senior Compliance Administrator at Westfield Manufacturing Solutions. I didn't grow up with silver spoons or corner office fantasies, but my parents taught me something more valuable than ambition. They taught me empathy. That ability to understand people, to read rooms, to recognize what matters beyond quarterly reports, became my greatest professional asset. This is the story of how one woman's dismissiveness, one crucial audit, and one meticulously maintained filing system converged into the most professionally satisfying week of my career. The morning briefing started like any other Tuesday. Cassandra Westfield Monroe had flown in from the corporate satellite office in Austin, armed with her newly minted MBA and enough confidence to fuel a rocket launch. At 29, she'd been appointed Director of Operational Efficiency, a title her father created to justify her salary while she learned the business. I'd been with Westfield Manufacturing for 17 years. Started as a file clerk right out of community college, worked my way through night school, earned my certifications one semester at a time. The company had evolved from a regional parts supplier to a multi-state operation with government contracts and international partnerships. I'd evolved with it, building systems, implementing protocols, and establishing redundancies that nobody appreciated until they needed them. We're entering a new era, Cassandra announced, her presentation clicker advancing through slides filled with buzzwords like digital transformation and streamlined documentation flow. She wore an ivory pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Part of modernizing our infrastructure means eliminating physical redundancies. My colleague, Thomas, shifted uncomfortably in the seat beside me. He'd been the operations manager for 12 years and had developed a healthy skepticism toward Cassandra's initiatives. Last quarter, her optimization strategy had eliminated a backup supplier relationship that took us 8 years to cultivate. We'd scrambled for 3 weeks when our primary vendor faced production delays. I've conducted a preliminary assessment of our archive room, Cassandra continued, her tone suggesting she'd actually spent more than 15 minutes glancing at labeled shelves. Approximately 60% of the physical documentation predates our current digital systems. It's redundant, it's consuming valuable real estate, and frankly, it's off-brand for a company positioning itself for acquisition. My spine straightened at that last word. Acquisition. That explained the sudden flurry of efficiency projects, the pressure to demonstrate lean operations, the emphasis on appearing cutting-edge rather than reliably functional. We're recycling those outdated binders by Friday, she declared, advancing to a slide showing the archive room transformed into what appeared to be a meditation space with plants and floor cushions. Anything not uploaded to the cloud system goes. HR will send around guidelines about personal item removal. Let's show potential partners that Westfield Manufacturing is a forward-thinking organization, not a museum. Heads nodded around the table, mostly from younger staff who'd never experienced a server failure, a corrupted database, or an audit request for documentation predating digital migration. My hand remained still, but my mind calculated rapidly. The digital upload project Cassandra referenced had been my initiative, started 4 years ago. I knew exactly which documents had been successfully digitized, which were in the queue, and which had been deemed low priority for conversion due to budget constraints. I also knew that our digital backup system, while robust, had never been stress-tested against the kind of comprehensive audit that accompanied major acquisitions. Questions? Cassandra's eyes swept the room with the confidence of someone who'd never been genuinely challenged. I raised my hand with the same measured calm I'd used in every professional interaction for nearly 2 decades. Regarding the pre-digital documentation, have we verified that all safety certifications, original permits, and regulatory compliance documents have been fully digitized with authenticated copies? Cassandra's smile maintained its wattage but lost its warmth. Adeline, I appreciate your thoroughness, but yes, it confirmed months ago that all essential documents are backed up. We're not throwing away anything important. We're eliminating paper copies of information that exists in superior digital format. It confirmed document upload completion, I clarified, keeping my tone neutral. Authenticated copies require notarized verification and often original signatures for legal standing, particularly for safety certifications and environmental permits. The digital copies serve operational purposes, but regulatory audits sometimes require original documentation. Sometimes, Cassandra repeated, her emphasis making the word sound quaint and outdated. And for those rare instances, we have established protocols with the issuing agencies to request certified copies. What we don't need is an entire room functioning as expensive storage for the infinitesimal chance that someone might want to see a physical piece of paper. Thomas cleared his throat. Adeline makes a solid point about the safety certifications. When we went through the ISO recertification last year we weren't preparing for valuation audits, Cassandra interrupted smoothly. The landscape has changed. Our priorities have evolved. Dad, Mr. Westfield, has approved this initiative personally. Unless there are other questions, let's move forward. The meeting dispersed with the usual scraping of chairs and muted conversations. I remained seated, reviewing my notes, calculating timelines. Friday was 4 days away. The valuation audit Cassandra mentioned was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Plenty of time, in her estimation, to present a streamlined, modern operation. But I'd been through acquisitions before, back in 2014, when Westfield absorbed a smaller competitor. I'd seen how audit timelines shifted, how requests evolved, how the difference between probably fine and absolutely certain could derail deals worth millions. You okay? Thomas paused by my chair, his voice low. I'm calculating risk, I replied honestly. She won't listen. Her mind's made up, and Westfield Sr. is giving her free rein to prove herself. I know. So what are you going to do? I met his eyes with the calm certainty that came from 17 years of being underestimated and consistently proving my value. My job, thoroughly. That afternoon, I visited the archive room with my tablet and a fresh cup of coffee. The space occupied a converted storage area on the building's lower level, climate-controlled, organized by my own classification system, and considerably more comprehensive than Cassandra's 15-minute assessment had suggested. The binders she dismissed as outdated represented the company's institutional memory. Tax documents from the year we first broke 7 figures in revenue. Environmental impact assessments from the 2012 facility expansion. Safety certifications from equipment installations spanning 2 decades. Original vendor contracts with amendment histories that told the story of business relationships built on handshakes and solidified through consistent performance. I digitized most of it, true. My initiative had converted thousands of pages into searchable PDFs, backed up across multiple servers and cloud storage solutions. But I'd also worked in corporate environments long enough to understand that digital wasn't infallible. Systems crashed, files corrupted, migration errors created gaps. And when high-stakes questions emerged, the kind that arose during $110 million valuation audits, having the original documentation wasn't paranoia, it was prudence. More importantly, I knew which documents I'd personally digitized with verification, and which had been scanned by the temp workers it brought in last summer to accelerate the process. Those temps had been instructed to scan quickly, not carefully. I'd found numerous issues: pages scanned out of order, signatures cropped from frame edges, illegible resolution on technical diagrams. I'd reported these concerns naturally, filed a comprehensive memo to it, copied the operations director, included specific examples. The response had been a polite acknowledgement and reassurance that quality control measures would be implemented. Then the temp contract ended, the scanning project was declared substantially complete, and my follow-up requests got buried under newer priorities. So I'd done what I always did: I'd quietly maintained my own standards. I'd kept the originals organized, accessible, and preserved. Not out of defiance, but out of professional responsibility to a company I'd served for 17 years. Now, standing in this archive room scheduled for elimination, I made a decision. I couldn't stop Cassandra's initiative. I didn't have the political capital to override the owner's daughter, especially when Mr. Westfield himself had approved the plan. But I could ensure that when the inevitable questions arose, I had answers. I began creating an inventory. Not the surface-level assessment Cassandra had conducted, but a detailed catalog of every document in this room cross-referenced against its digital counterpart. I noted scan quality, signature visibility, notarization clarity, and legal authentication status. It took me 3 days. I worked through lunch hours, stayed late 2 evenings, and came in early on Friday morning. Thomas covered for me when Cassandra asked about my whereabouts, citing routine compliance reviews, which wasn't inaccurate, just incomplete. On Thursday afternoon, I discovered something that confirmed my worst suspicions. While cross-referencing the 2017 environmental compliance documents, I pulled up the digital file and opened the PDF. The document loaded, but when I zoomed in on the signatures, the resolution pixelated into uselessness. I grabbed the original binder from the shelf and compared them side by side. The original showed 3 distinct signatures from the Municipal Environmental Board, each with clear notary stamps bearing raised seals. The digital version showed blurry marks that could have been signatures or coffee stains. Any auditor would reject this immediately. I tested 5 more critical documents randomly. 3 had similar issues, acceptable for internal reference, completely inadequate for legal verification. I pulled out my phone and photographed several examples, then drafted an email to it with specific file names and deficiency descriptions. My finger hovered over the send button for a long moment. Sending this would create a paper trail showing I'd identified problems before Cassandra's elimination deadline. It would protect me if issues arose later. It would also alert everyone to problems that might delay or derail the archive consolidation, putting me in direct conflict with Cassandra's initiative just days before implementation. I saved the email as a draft and closed my laptop. Instead, I started pulling binders. The 2019 Facility Expansion Certification, 12 inches thick with engineering approvals, safety inspections, and municipal permits. The 2015 Water Treatment Installation with EPA compliance documentation. The Founding Incorporation papers with original signatures from 1987. The first patent application that had launched Westfield's proprietary manufacturing process. I worked methodically, stacking selected binders on the rolling cart I'd retrieved from the supply room. An intern from accounting passed by the open door, glanced at my growing stack, and continued without comment. To anyone observing, I was simply doing compliance work, reviewing documentation, organizing files, the same quiet administrative tasks I'd performed for 17 years. By Thursday evening, I had 43 binders staged. Not hidden in the cart, not smuggled out in bags, simply relocated from archive scheduled for elimination to active compliance reference materials with the same systematic care I applied to everything. By Friday at noon, when the recycling company arrived with industrial bins, I had my inventory complete. I'd also done something else, something that existed in the gray area between protocol and initiative. I'd relocated specific documents. Not many, maybe 40 binders total. Original safety certifications, authenticated environmental permits, notarized equipment installation approvals, the founding documents from when Westfield Manufacturing had incorporated, the original patent applications from Mr. Westfield's first proprietary process design. These weren't documents I could digitize more thoroughly or for which I could request certified copies quickly. These were the irreplaceable foundation stones of the company's legal and operational legitimacy. I transferred them to a secured cabinet in my office, filed under active compliance reference materials. Not hidden, not stolen, simply reclassified from archive to active use based on my professional judgment as senior compliance administrator. Then I watched through my office window as the recycling bins filled with 17 years of institutional memory, and I hoped my precautions would prove unnecessary. They weren't. Monday morning, I arrived to find an email from Mr. Westfield's executive assistant. The valuation audit had been moved up. The potential acquisition partner had scheduling conflicts and wanted to accelerate the due diligence timeline. The audit team would arrive Wednesday instead of 3 weeks out. 2 days' notice instead of 3 weeks. I read the email twice, then immediately began reviewing my inventory against the scheduled audit scope. The valuation was comprehensive: financial records, operational capabilities, regulatory compliance, safety certifications, environmental standing, and legal documentation. Everything that established Westfield Manufacturing as a legitimate, well-managed, acquisition-worthy company. The morning briefing felt tense. Mr. Westfield himself attended, a rarity that underscored the stakes. At 67, Gregory Westfield still had the bearing of the machinist who'd built this company from a garage operation, even if his daily involvement had diminished in recent years. Wednesday's timeline is aggressive, he acknowledged, his voice gravelly from decades of shop floor work before corner office migrations. But it also demonstrates their serious interest. Cassandra, you've been leading our operational optimization. What's our readiness status? His daughter didn't hesitate. We're in excellent position. The documentation streamlining we completed last week actually works in our favor. We present as a modern, efficient operation without the cluttered appearance of legacy systems. All essential documents are digitally accessible, our operational metrics are strong, and our facilities reflect current best practices. Adeline, Mr. Westfield turned to me, and I felt the room's attention shift. Compliance is your domain. Any concerns about the accelerated timeline? This was the moment. I could voice my reservations about the recycled documentation, the untested digital systems, the potential gaps. But doing so would publicly challenge Cassandra's assurances, potentially undermine the acquisition her father clearly wanted, and paint myself as the obstacle to progress. Or I could trust my preparations and respond with professional confidence. I've conducted a comprehensive compliance review, I said carefully. All regulatory requirements are current, our certifications are valid, and I've prepared documentation packages for the anticipated audit scope. We're ready. It was true, I was ready. Whether the company's official systems were ready was a different question, but one I couldn't answer without access I didn't have and political capital I'd never accumulated. Mr. Westfield nodded, satisfied. Cassandra's smile returned, triumphant in that subtle way that declared victory without words. The meeting adjourned with task assignments and preparation protocols. As people filed out, Cassandra approached my chair. I appreciate you not creating complications, she said quietly, her tone pleasant but her eyes calculating. I know you had reservations about the archive elimination, but we're proving that modernization works. Try to embrace progress instead of always looking backward. I met her gaze with the same measured calm I'd perfected over 17 years. I always look forward, but I never forget where the foundation is buried. She laughed, a light dismissive sound. That's very poetic, Adeline, very you. Then she walked away, her heels clicking confidently against the polished floor. Thomas waited until she'd left before approaching. You pulled the critical documents, didn't you? I relocated active compliance materials to appropriate storage, I replied, not quite answering. That's why you're not panicking about Wednesday. I'm not panicking about Wednesday because panic doesn't solve problems. Preparation does. He studied me for a moment, then shook his head with something between admiration and concern. You know she'll take credit if this goes smoothly, and blame you if anything goes wrong. I know. And you're okay with that? I considered the question honestly. I'm okay with doing my job well regardless of who notices. Recognition is nice. Professional integrity is necessary. Wednesday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made our facility look particularly impressive. The landscaping vibrant, the building's steel and glass architecture gleaming, the parking lot orderly. First impressions mattered in these situations, and Westfield Manufacturing presented well. The audit team arrived at 9 sharp. 3 individuals from Sterling Venture Partners, the investment group conducting preliminary due diligence on behalf of the potential acquisition partner. Leading them was Malcolm Pierce, a senior auditor whose resume included validations for companies 5 times our size. I'd researched him, naturally. 43 years old, MBA from Northwestern, specialized in manufacturing sector acquisitions. Known for thoroughness. His reports could make or break deals, and his reputation meant he had no incentive to cut corners or accept surface-level assurances. Cassandra led the initial facility tour while I prepared the conference room we designated as their audit headquarters. I'd arranged documentation packages by category, set up secure Wi-Fi access for their laptops, ensured the coffee service was excellent, and placed my personal tablet where I could access my inventory system if questions arose. At 10:15, Malcolm's team returned from the facility tour and immediately began their systematic review. I watched as the junior auditor, a woman named Holly Brennan, opened her laptop and started pulling up our digital files. She navigated to the environmental compliance folder and began spot-checking documents against her printed checklist. Her expression shifted from neutral to concerned within minutes. She zoomed in on a signature, frowned, then looked up at her colleague. Ryan, can you verify something? The other junior auditor leaned over to examine her screen. They exchanged glances that I recognized immediately, the silent communication of professionals encountering problems they'd need to escalate. Holly raised her hand slightly to catch Malcolm's attention. He was reviewing financial statements with Cassandra, but excused himself and moved to Holly's position. What am I seeing? He asked quietly. The digital files are showing resolution issues on critical signatures and notarizations, Holly explained, tilting her screen so he could see clearly. This environmental permit from 2016, the signatures are barely visible. Same issue with the 2018 safety inspection approval. I can't verify authenticity from these scans. Malcolm leaned closer, his experienced eyes scanning the documents quickly. His jaw tightened slightly, the only outward sign of concern from a man who'd undoubtedly encountered every variety of documentation problem. He straightened and turned to Cassandra with professional courtesy that barely masked the seriousness of his question. Miss Westfield Monroe, it appears your digital archive may have some quality control issues. For audit purposes, we'll need to examine original documentation for verification. Can you provide the physical copies of these permits and certifications? Cassandra's confident expression flickered for just a moment before recovering. As I mentioned during our preliminary discussions, we recently modernized our documentation systems. The physical archives were consolidated last week. However, all essential information is captured in our digital files. The information may be captured, Malcolm replied carefully, but legal authentication requires verifiable signatures and notarizations. Scanned copies with degraded resolution don't meet audit standards for regulatory compliance verification. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The morning proceeded with increasing tension as Malcolm's team encountered more examples of the same issue. Financial records reviewed smoothly. Those had been digitized by professional services. Operational metrics assessed without problem. Those were generated from current management systems. But regulatory compliance documentation, environmental permits, safety certifications. The archives I'd personally overseen, the materials scanned by temporary contractors with speed prioritized over quality. Those revealed systematic deficiencies. By 11:30, Malcolm called for a brief recess. Cassandra excused herself to make phone calls, her composure intact but her movements sharp with controlled frustration. Mr. Westfield joined for portions of it, answering questions about company history and strategic vision with the genuine passion of a founder who still believed in his life's work. Lunch was catered, nothing ostentatious, but quality food that struck the right balance between professional hospitality and operational efficiency. Cassandra worked the room with practiced charm, positioning herself as the face of Westfield's future while respectfully deferring to her father's expertise on historical questions. I remained quietly available, responding to requests, providing clarifications, and monitoring the audit's progression with the same careful attention I gave to everything. The afternoon session focused on regulatory compliance and legal documentation. This was my domain, the area where 17 years of meticulous record-keeping either validated our company's legitimacy or exposed gaps that could devalue the acquisition. Malcolm Pierce opened a thick binder of audit requirements and began working through his checklist. Current business licenses, provided digitally, cross-referenced, confirmed. Tax compliance documentation, comprehensive records accessed through our accounting system, verified. Environmental permits for the current facility, uploaded to their secure portal, authenticated. Then he reached the section that made my pulse quicken just slightly, though my expression remained perfectly neutral. I'll need to see the original safety certification from the 2019 facility expansion, Malcolm said, his pen poised over his notepad. The project added the eastern wing and installed the automated assembly line. OSHA certification, structural engineering approval, fire safety compliance, the complete package. Cassandra didn't miss a beat. Everything's in our digital system. Adeline, pull up the 2019 safety certifications, please. I'd been expecting this. I moved to the laptop we'd connected to the conference room display and accessed our document management system. I navigated to the appropriate folder, dated 2019, labeled Facility Expansion, Safety Documentation. The folder appeared, I clicked it open. It was empty. Not corrupted, not loading slowly, completely, inexplicably empty. I felt Cassandra's energy shift behind me, though her voice remained controlled. That's odd. Adeline, try the backup directory. I did, same result, empty folder. Server synchronization issue, she explained to Malcolm, her tone suggesting minor technical hiccups were beneath his concern. Our IT department recently upgraded our cloud infrastructure. Occasionally, there are latency issues with older files. I'll have them resolve this within the hour. Malcolm's expression remained professionally neutral, but he made a notation in his binder. I understand technical difficulties happen. However, for audit purposes, I need to verify the original documentation. If you can provide certified copies from the issuing agency, that would also satisfy the requirement. Absolutely, Cassandra assured him. Though certified copies can take a few days to request and receive, is there flexibility in the timeline? Some, Malcolm acknowledged. But the 2019 expansion is significant to the valuation. It represents 30% of your current production capacity and involved substantial capital investment. Confirming that it's properly certified, legally compliant, and fully approved is essential to validating your operational legitimacy. Translation. Without this documentation, the valuation drops significantly if it proceeds at all. Cassandra maintained her composure beautifully. Of course, we completely understand. Adeline, contact it immediately about the server issue and simultaneously begin the process of requesting certified copies from the relevant agencies. Let's get this resolved today. I could have done exactly that. I could have called it, initiated the certified copy requests, and joined the scrambling effort to solve a problem created by Cassandra's optimization initiative. Instead, I stood from the laptop and said calmly, "That won't be necessary. I have the originals." The room went completely silent. Cassandra's head turned toward me so sharply I thought I heard her neck crack. "Excuse me." "The original safety certification package from the 2019 facility expansion," I repeated, my tone remaining perfectly professional. "I have it, along with the authenticated copies of the structural engineering approval, the fire safety compliance documentation, and the OSHA certification. They're in my office, filed under active compliance materials." Malcolm's pen stopped moving. Mr. Westfield leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. Cassandra's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, realization, anger, and finally a forced smile. "How fortunate," she managed, her voice tight. "I wasn't aware we'd reclassified those particular documents as active files." "Standard protocol for critical regulatory documentation," I replied, meeting her eyes with absolute calm. "Original certifications for major infrastructure investments are maintained in accessible storage to facilitate rapid response to audit requests or regulatory inquiries. I relocated them to appropriate filing during routine compliance review." "When?" the single word from Cassandra carried edge she couldn't quite conceal. "Last week, prior to the archive consolidation." Understanding dawned in her eyes. I'd pulled the documents before she'd recycled the archive room. I'd known, or at least anticipated, that her comprehensive digital system might not be as reliable as promised. And now, in front of the auditor who could make or break this deal, she had to choose between acknowledging that I'd saved the audit or challenging my decision to circumvent her elimination order. She chose pragmatism, as I'd calculated she would. "Well done, Adeline," she said, the words audibly costing her. "Your thoroughness is appreciated. Please retrieve the documentation so we can continue." I nodded and left the conference room, acutely aware of the silence I left behind. My office was 2 floors up, accessible via the stairs I'd climbed thousands of times over 17 years. The secured cabinet sat behind my desk, organized with the same meticulous care I applied to everything. I retrieved the 2019 safety certification binder. Thick, tabbed, every document in protective sleeves, every signature visible, every notarization clear. I paused before returning, taking 3 slow breaths. This moment would define something, though I wasn't entirely sure what yet. Professional vindication felt satisfying, but I'd never been motivated by proving others wrong, only by proving myself competent. Still, as I carried that binder back down the stairs, I couldn't deny the quiet satisfaction settling in my chest. I returned to the conference room, where the silence had evolved into low conversation. Mr. Westfield was explaining something about the facility expansion to Malcolm, his hands gesturing as he described the engineering challenges they'd overcome. Cassandra stood by the window, her posture perfect but her jaw tight. I placed the binder on the table in front of Malcolm. The complete 2019 safety certification package, all original documents, authenticated signatures, notarized where required. He opened it immediately, his experienced eyes scanning the contents with the systematic thoroughness I recognized from my own work style. Tab by tab, he reviewed the structural engineering approval, the fire safety compliance certificate, the OSHA inspection results, the electrical system certification, the environmental impact assessment approval. "This is comprehensive," he said after several minutes. "And these are definitely the originals. I can see the notary seals, the original signatures, even the municipal stamp on the permit approval." He looked up at me with something approaching respect. "Your filing system is exceptional." "Thank you. Maintaining accurate records is fundamental to operational integrity." "It is," he agreed. "And in my experience, companies with meticulous compliance administration tend to demonstrate excellence in other operational areas as well." It speaks to organizational culture. He made several notations in his binder, positive ones, I judged from his expression. Mr. Westfield looked quietly pleased. Cassandra remained by the window. "Let's continue," Malcolm said, returning to his checklist. "I'll also need the original environmental permits from the 2015 water treatment system installation and the founding incorporation documents from when the company was first established. 2 more items that had been in the archive room. 2 more items I'd relocated to my secured cabinet." "I have both," I said simply. "I'll retrieve them." This time, when I left the conference room, I heard Cassandra's heels following me into the hallway. I didn't slow down or acknowledge her until her voice stopped me. "Adeline." I turned, maintaining professional neutrality, despite the fury radiating from her controlled expression. "We need to discuss your decision to remove documents from the archive without authorization," she said, her voice low enough to avoid carrying to the conference room. "I relocated active compliance materials to appropriate storage consistent with my role as Senior Compliance Administrator," I replied calmly. "The documents in question are critical regulatory certifications requiring immediate accessibility for audit situations exactly like the one currently in progress. You deliberately circumvented my directive to consolidate the archive. I fulfilled my professional responsibility to ensure audit readiness. Your directive was to eliminate redundant documentation. The materials I relocated aren't redundant. They're irreplaceable originals with legal standing that digital copies don't possess." Her eyes narrowed. "You're trying to make me look incompetent in front of the auditor." "I'm trying to ensure this audit succeeds. Your appearance is your own responsibility, as is mine." "This isn't over," she said, the threat barely veiled. "The audit continues through tomorrow," I acknowledged. "I'll retrieve the requested documents and ensure Mr. Pierce has everything he needs. We can discuss internal process questions after we've secured the valuation." I didn't wait for her response. I continued to my office, retrieved the environmental permits and incorporation documents, and returned to the conference room where professional duty mattered more than personal conflict. The afternoon proceeded with similar rhythm. Malcolm would request documentation, sometimes from his prepared checklist, sometimes spontaneous inquiries prompted by previous answers. Each time, I either accessed the digital files successfully or provided the original documentation I'd preserved. At 3:40, Malcolm asked for the original patent application from Westfield's proprietary bearing assembly process, the innovation that had transformed the company from a parts supplier to a specialized manufacturer with competitive advantages. I retrieved it from my cabinet, a yellow document from 1991, complete with hand-drawn technical diagrams and Mr. Westfield's original signature on the application form. When I placed it on the table, Mr. Westfield's expression transformed. He reached out and touched the document with unexpected tenderness, his weathered fingers tracing the edges of diagrams he'd drawn 3 decades ago. "I'd forgotten about these drawings," he said quietly. "I did them at my kitchen table over a weekend. Took me 17 tries to get the bearing alignment calculations right." Malcolm examined the patent documentation with renewed interest. "This is fascinating. The progression from concept sketches to final technical specifications tells a compelling story about innovation development." "May I?" Mr. Westfield asked, and at Malcolm's nod, he carefully turned the pages, stopping at a diagram covered in penciled calculations and margin notes. That's where I figured out the friction reduction coefficient that made the whole design viable. Changed everything." He looked up at me, his eyes carrying an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "Adeline, where was this stored?" "In the archive room," I replied. "Filed under historical patent documentation. I relocated it last week along with the other founding materials." "You saved this." It wasn't a question. If this had been recycled, we'd have lost the original application forever. The patent office has copies, but not these working drawings, not the development notes. I recognized its historical and legal significance, I said simply. Mr. Westfield carefully closed the binder and slid it back toward Malcolm. My daughter was right that we need to modernize, but Adeline understood something equally important. You can't build the future without preserving the foundation that made it possible. The statement hung in the air, a tacit acknowledgement of competing perspectives and the value of both. By 4:30, Malcolm had completed the compliance section of his audit and looked genuinely impressed. "I've conducted valuations for 47 companies," he said, closing his binder with the satisfied precision of someone who'd found exactly what he needed. Very few maintain documentation standards of this caliber. Whoever manages your compliance systems deserves recognition. Mr. Westfield smiled, the proud expression of a founder who'd built something lasting. Adeline's been our institutional memory for 17 years. She understands that manufacturing isn't just about production, it's about precision, documentation, and accountability. "It shows," Malcolm confirmed. "From a due diligence perspective, your regulatory standing is immaculate. That significantly strengthens your valuation position." Cassandra had regained her composure enough to smile professionally, though it didn't reach her eyes. "We've invested heavily in operational excellence across all departments. It's gratifying to see that recognized." The meeting adjourned with schedules for tomorrow's continuation, financial deep dive, and strategic planning assessment. As Malcolm and his team departed to their hotel, Mr. Westfield lingered in the conference room. "Adeline, a word, please." I remained while others filed out, including Cassandra, who shot me an unreadable glance before leaving. Mr. Westfield waited until we were alone before speaking. "You pulled those documents before Cassandra recycled the archive." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I've been through acquisitions before, and I know how quickly audit requirements can surface. Because our digital migration, while extensive, was executed by temporary contractors with variable quality control. Because maintaining original documentation for critical regulatory certifications is standard compliance practice." I paused, "and because I believed it was the right thing to do." He studied me for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful. "You went around my daughter's directive." "I fulfilled my professional obligations as I understood them. If that created conflict with other initiatives, I apologize." "Don't," he said gruffly. "Don't apologize for being right. Cassandra is brilliant in many ways, strategic thinking, market positioning, networking. But she doesn't have 17 years of institutional knowledge. She doesn't understand that some of the old ways exist because they work." I remained silent, uncertain where this conversation was heading. "This acquisition matters," he continued. "It's not just about money, though $110 million is nothing to dismiss. It's about ensuring this company survives my retirement, provides security for the 200 employees who depend on it, and honors the legacy I've built." "I understand." "You saved that today. If we'd been unable to provide those certifications, Malcolm's report would have flagged serious concerns. The valuation would have dropped, possibly tanked entirely. Your foresight, your diligence, your refusal to simply follow orders without applying professional judgment. That's what protected this company's future." Pride warmed my chest, though I kept my expression professionally modest. I was doing my job. "You were doing it exceptionally well." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I'm going to have a conversation with Cassandra about organizational appreciation and collaborative leadership. But I wanted you to hear directly from me. Thank you." After he left, I remained in the empty conference room for several minutes, processing the day. 17 years of quiet competence, of being underestimated, of maintaining standards when no one was watching, all of it had converged into this single afternoon where preparation met opportunity. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "You're a legend. Drinks on me when this is over." I smiled and began gathering the document binders for secure storage overnight. Thursday's audit session focused on financial projections and operational capacity, areas where my direct involvement was minimal. I attended the morning briefing, provided clarifying documentation when requested, and otherwise observed as Malcolm's team worked through manufacturing metrics, supply chain relationships, and growth potential assessments. Cassandra had regained her full professional polish, presenting market analysis and expansion strategies with the polished confidence that came naturally to her. Whatever conversation she'd had with her father hadn't diminished her role in the audit. If anything, she seemed more determined to prove her strategic value. I respected that. For all our conflicts, she genuinely cared about the company's success, even if her methods sometimes prioritized appearance over substance. By mid-afternoon, Malcolm's preliminary assessment was complete. He'd tour the production facility one final time, conduct exit interviews with key personnel, and deliver his initial findings to Mr. Westfield before departing. I was updating compliance files in my office when the call came from the executive suite. "Adeline, Mr. Westfield would like you in the main conference room." I saved my work and headed upstairs, uncertain what to expect. When I entered, I found Mr. Westfield, Cassandra, Thomas, and Malcolm Pierce seated around the table. "Adeline, join us," Mr. Westfield gestured to an empty chair. Malcolm wanted to share some preliminary observations before he finalizes his report. I sat, maintaining professional composure, while my curiosity sharpened. Malcolm referenced his tablet, then addressed the room. "I'll submit my comprehensive report next week, but I can share that Westfield manufacturing presents very favorably for acquisition consideration. Your financial metrics are solid, your operational efficiency is competitive, your market position is defensible, and your growth potential aligns with the acquisition partner's strategic objectives." Mr. Westfield nodded, satisfaction evident in his posture. "However," Malcolm continued, and the room's energy shifted. "What distinguished this audit? What elevated my assessment from acceptable candidate to strong recommendation was the organizational culture I observed." He looked directly at me. "Specifically, the compliance infrastructure that Ms. Thorncroft has built. In most companies, compliance is treated as a necessary burden, a checkbox exercise to satisfy regulators. Here, I found a comprehensive documentation system that reflects genuine operational integrity. That's rare, valuable, and indicative of sustainable business practices." "Adeline's been invaluable," Mr. Westfield acknowledged. "She's more than invaluable," Malcolm corrected gently. "She's a strategic asset. The companies that succeed long-term aren't the ones with flashy innovation or aggressive growth tactics, though those matter. They're the ones with robust systems, institutional knowledge, and people who understand that excellence is built on details." He closed his tablet. "When I write my report, I'll note that one of Westfield Manufacturing's competitive advantages is its compliance infrastructure and the personnel maintaining it. Acquisition partners pay attention to those observations." The meeting concluded shortly after with handshakes and professional courtesies. As Malcolm departed, Mr. Westfield asked Cassandra and me to remain. "I've been thinking about organizational structure," he began, settling back into his chair with the weariness of someone who'd spent 2 intense days under scrutiny. "This audit process revealed some gaps in how we approach operational oversight." Cassandra's posture stiffened slightly, but she remained attentive. "Cassandra, your strategic vision and modernization initiatives are moving this company forward," he continued. "But strategy without infrastructure is just aspiration. We need both, the forward-looking innovation you bring and the operational integrity that Adeline represents." He looked between us. "I'm restructuring the leadership team. Cassandra, you'll continue as Director of Strategic Operations, title change to reflect your actual strengths. Your focus will be market positioning, partnership development, and growth strategy." She nodded, processing. "Adeline, I'm creating a new position, Vice President of Compliance and Operational Integrity. You'll oversee not just documentation and regulatory adherence, but also quality control systems, institutional knowledge preservation, and organizational standards. It comes with appropriate compensation adjustment and a seat at the senior leadership table." I felt the words land but couldn't quite process them. Vice President, senior leadership. After 17 years of being the reliable administrator in the background, suddenly I was being positioned in the foreground. I started, then steadied myself. "I'm honored, Mr. Westfield, thank you." You've earned it. This week proved what I should have formalized years ago. Your contribution isn't administrative support, it's strategic leadership. Cassandra turned to me, her expression complex but genuine. Congratulations, Adeline, sincerely. Thank you, I replied, searching her face for resentment and finding something more mature. Acceptance, perhaps, or at least professional respect. After we left the conference room, she paused in the hallway. I owe you an acknowledgement, she said quietly. You were right about the archive documents. My initiative was strategically sound but operationally premature. I should have consulted you before implementing it. And I could have communicated my concerns more directly rather than working around your directive, I admitted. We both could have handled it better. We could have, she agreed, but we both also did what we thought served the company's best interest. That's worth something. She extended her hand. I shook it, recognizing this for what it was, not friendship necessarily, but professional mutual respect earned through conflict and resolution. The acquisition completed in January. Sterling Venture Partners facilitated a partnership with Denison Industrial Group, a conglomerate seeking to expand their manufacturing capacity. Westfield Manufacturing maintained operational autonomy, Mr. Westfield retained advisory status, and the $110 million valuation held firm. My new role as vice president transformed my daily reality. I hired 2 compliance specialists to manage documentation systems I'd previously handled alone. I implemented a comprehensive knowledge preservation program, ensuring institutional memory wouldn't depend on a single person's filing cabinet. I collaborated with Cassandra on integration strategies that balanced modernization with operational stability. The archive room, or what remained after the recycling initiative, was converted into the training center Cassandra had envisioned, but with a significant addition. One wall now featured glass-enclosed cabinets displaying key historical documents, the original incorporation papers, the first patent application, photographs of the garage where Mr. Westfield had started the company. Honoring history while building the future, Cassandra had said when unveiling the space. Both matter. I stood in my new office, larger, with windows overlooking the facility floor, and reflected on the journey from file clerk to vice president. 17 years of showing up, doing excellent work, maintaining standards when no one was watching, and trusting that competence would eventually be recognized. The recognition felt good, certainly. The title, the compensation, the seat at the leadership table, all deeply satisfying. But the real satisfaction came from something simpler. Knowing that when the critical moment arrived, when everything hung in the balance, I'd been prepared. Not because I'd sought glory or anticipated reward, but because doing the job right had always been its own purpose. My phone chimed with a meeting reminder, leadership team strategic planning session. I gathered my materials and headed to the conference room where Cassandra was already reviewing presentation slides. Thomas was pouring coffee, and Mr. Westfield, now in his advisory role, sat at the table with the quiet contentment of a founder watching his legacy continue. Adeline, Cassandra greeted me with genuine warmth that had developed over months of collaborative work. Ready to push back on my ambitious timeline proposals. I smiled, settling into my chair. Ready to ensure your ambitious timeline proposals have sustainable implementation strategies. That's why we keep you around, she said, grinning. The meeting began, and I participated not as the quiet administrator maintaining files in the background, but as a strategic leader helping shape the company's future. My voice carried weight, my expertise commanded respect, and my years of preparation had positioned me exactly where competence deserved to be. The document binders that had seemed so outdated to Cassandra, the filing systems she dismissed as unnecessary, the institutional knowledge I'd quietly preserved. All of it had proven that sometimes the old ways and the new ways aren't opposing forces. They're complementary pieces of organizational excellence, and the wisdom is knowing which applies when. As the strategic planning discussion evolved around me, I thought about that Tuesday morning 3 months ago when Cassandra had announced the archive elimination. I thought about my decision to preserve the critical documentation despite the political risk. I thought about the moment Malcolm Pierce had asked for those safety certifications, and I'd calmly provided what others assumed was lost. That moment, when preparation met opportunity, when competence proved its value, when years of being underestimated culminated in absolute professional vindication. That moment validated every late night, every meticulous filing decision, every choice to do the job right even when no one was watching. Not because I'd needed external validation to know my worth, but because sometimes, just sometimes, it's deeply satisfying to be absolutely, demonstrably, undeniably right when it matters most. And that's not revenge. That's just excellence, patiently waiting for its moment. As the strategic planning discussion evolved around me, I thought about that Tuesday morning 3 months ago when Cassandra had announced the archive elimination. I thought about my decision to preserve the critical documentation despite the political risk. I thought about the moment Malcolm Pierce had asked for those safety certifications, and I'd calmly provided what others assumed was lost. That moment, when preparation met opportunity, when competence proved its value, when years of being underestimated culminated in absolute professional vindication. That moment validated every late night, every meticulous filing decision, every choice to do the job right even when no one was watching. Not because I'd needed external validation to know my worth, but because sometimes, just sometimes, it's deeply satisfying to be absolutely, demonstrably, undeniably right when it matters most. And that's not revenge. That's just excellence, patiently waiting for its moment. The archive elimination that seemed like dismissal of my work became the catalyst for recognizing its value. The audit that could have exposed gaps instead revealed the strength of systems built on 17 years of diligent care. The professional relationship that started in conflict evolved into collaborative respect. I didn't set out to prove Cassandra wrong or to claim vindication. I set out to do my job with the same thoroughness I'd always applied, to honor the professional standards I'd maintained throughout my career, and to protect a company I'd served faithfully for 17 years. The promotion, the recognition, the leadership role, those were outcomes, not objectives. The real victory was simpler and more profound. The quiet certainty that competence matters, preparation pays off, and excellence eventually finds its spotlight. Not through dramatic confrontation or political maneuvering, but through the steady accumulation of doing good work, maintaining high standards, and trusting that professionalism is its own reward. Even when no one's watching, especially when no one's watching. Because the person who knows whether you've done excellent work is you. And that knowledge, that professional integrity that doesn't depend on external validation, is the foundation of genuine confidence. Everything else is just the world catching up to what you've always known. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed only to prove your value when it mattered most, then you're part of this community. Subscribe to Payback Office channel and help us reach 8,000 subscribers who believe that workplace excellence isn't about politics or drama, but about competence, preparation, and the quiet satisfaction of being right when it counts. Your experience matters, your professionalism deserves recognition, and your story, whatever it is, has a place here.